Count-Zee's Very Metal Video Game Reviews. Alright, I don't often have time for video games, but about this time of the year, when winter sets in, I like to break up the monotony of creating music, graphic design stuff, and authoring my new books by jamming on video games from time to time to blow off steam. I want to tell you about a few games you may or may not want to check out, but first, sweet memories. I recall getting Pong as a kid and thinking it was like the coolest thing ever. It wasn't long before I became one of the few people to discover Warren Robinette's Easter egg in Atari 2600's third-person adventure game, Adventure. I'd like to think the gaming world sent up its kudos with the inclusion of Halo 3's Count-Zee pixel game Easter egg. Yes, there is an Easter egg in Halo 3, the Count-Zee pixel game. See if you can find it. Anyway, everything changed when the greatest third-person arcade adventure game came out in the late 80s. This game was Gauntlet. In my humble opinion, this game still remains the best arcade game of all time. I used to be able to go to the arcade and I would pop in a quarter and I could play the thing all damn day long. At the time, I could not wait until I had enough money in the bank where I could go out and buy one of these babies to put in my own house. 15 years later, you can actually go out and buy the game contained in a joystick module that you hook up to your TV with RCA jacks for only $10. What a glorious day was when I discovered that thing. In the years since, we've seen video games come a long way. In modern games all descend from the early 90s id Software game Doom. In fact, I remember playing Doom in the Smashing Pumpkins dressing room back in the days when I was still a roadie. Ah, the good old days. A lot of games and gaming devices have come and gone since those golden years of first person, and my favorite still remains to this day, the original Quake. No game since has been this imaginative, enthralling, exciting, riveting, or just plain badass, in my never-to-be-humble opinion. Subsequent sequels to the game grew ever more and more lame. Even still, id Software are the kings of imaginative gaming, hence taking us to our next all-time classic, Return to Castle Wolfenstein. Or is it Wolfenstein? I guess it's 6 one way, half a dozen another. There are many things that make this game an extraordinary experience, including state-of-the-art AI, lush locations, the ability to sneak around and snipe enemies rather than to engage them close up, and the fascinating storyline which amazingly has a basis in reality. Yes, Heinrich Himmler did conduct paranormal research as was suggested in films like Raiders of the Lost Ark, and he actually did believe he was the reincarnation of warlord Heinrich I. There is no evidence that the real Nazis had mechanical cyborg warriors, but let's face it, I wouldn't put anything past those guys. Oddly, at some point, the United States Department of State published a report to Congress that suggested that Wolfenstein was an anti-Semitic video game, but without qualifications. We're killing Nazis here, aren't we? Another totally awesome paranormal game was Clive Barker's The Undying. Unfortunately, never made available outside the PC platform. This game had an enthralling storyline and very scary and very creepy gameplay. No game can top the creep factor here, in my opinion. Built on the Unreal Tournament game engine, this is a true, unmatched first-person adventure set in the early 19th century. Speaking of Unreal Tournament, no funner tournament games have there been than the original Unreal Tournament games, especially 2004's Game of the Year, in my book. I believe I have spent more time in the conveyor map of this game than I have in any other video game outside of Gauntlet. And when it comes to music, you can't beat the music from games like Unreal Tournament's The Awakening, or, well, like music from Return to Castle Wolfenstein. Totally awesome. And when talking about classic video games, you cannot overlook the inbred charm of Redneck Rampage. Redneck Rampage is one of those games that should be revisited to gamers, but for some reason has not. About the time I started cozying up to the creators of Redneck Rampage, Interplay Software, a few years ago, they entered bankruptcy. I was told that my Acid Orangutan CD became mandatory listening for the programmers/developers for a time right before they had to shut their doors. The Interplay IP roster was sold to a French company, and a few years ago the film rights to Redneck Rampage were optioned to Columbia Pictures, who had a director in place for the production, which seems to have been shelved. That's okay, we still have Redneck Carnage in the meantime. No hillbilly or redneck stereotype was left unturned in the Redneck Rampage game. We got to visit maps which included haunted cliff dwellings, Area 51, they called it Area 69. There's a farm, a Winnebago show, a freaky sideshow, a swamp with a crashed commercial jetliner, a small rural town center, a truck stop, bowling alley, there's a trailer court with a twister, and a place called Disgraceland. Yep, you heard it right. Disgraceland. Incidentally, the only game to come close to the feel of Redneck Rampage, at least for me, is last year's Left 4 Dead 2, which takes place in what appears to me to be Louisiana, at least from what I can tell after all the time I've spent in that beautiful state. There's something about the swamps and the parishes. What can I tell you? Left 4 Dead is one of the better, newer games I've tried for that stated reason. I think I would like the game more if I was the only character in the game and I didn't have 3 other characters constantly following me around, sometimes creating a liability. At least we have plenty of sniper rifles this time around and a guitar you can use as a melee weapon. As far as new games, I give it a 3 out of 5 stars. Now, moving on, the description and rating on the case made me purchase Splatterhouse. And only after I found myself pissed off at this game did I realize it got slaughtered by reviewers. Most annoying of the third-person format, the clerk at the GameStop promised me that this game was going to be first-person. Liar! The fact that the controller moves are hard to figure out, the slow game reloads, and the boring storyline. Not to mention that the game tips are very shiny at the bottom of the screen. Even on my humongous TV, I can barely read this text. What the F? Oddly, the one thing I do like about this game is when Satan's mask berates me when I mess up. Oh, that was bound to happen! Hilarious. A better demonic first-person shooter from the original Xbox platform is Painkiller. It's like Serious Sam in hell. If you can make it to the last level of this game, take some time to check out the map after you kill all the baddies and the big boss. It's like an early 20th century European war zone frozen in a moment in time. It's very cool. I'd say 3 out of 5 stars. My vote for the best new game is the new Castle Wolfenstein. I've tried a lot of military and war games, and they all suck for one reason or another, but the new Wolfenstein is a gem. There is a bit of a learning curve at first, but if you can struggle through and make it to the end, you can come back and start right in with all the powers and weapons and take your time and explore this beautifully detailed game without getting your ass handed to you every 5 seconds. And there's stuff like this. She was already dead, I swear. And that's Count-Zee's video game reviews. So if you know of any really cool games that are first person, involve sneaking around, have beautiful maps, historical settings, and yeah. Anyway, just let me know. I'll check you later. Count-Zee's list the best technical metal bands. I have listened to metal for years, but nothing quite speaks to me about metal's promise for the future as technical or sometimes called futuristic metal. Here is a list of a few of my favorites. Cynic, the best metal album to come out in years unless somebody can come forward with evidence to prove otherwise, is Cynic's Traced in Air. I got to see these guys in St. Louis 2 years ago and pretty much had an out-of-body experience seeing these guys perform this, their second and best album to date. Keep practicing, schmucks. Maybe in the next life you'll be this creative and talented. One other band that's been around more recently that I like is Killswitch Engage. But the band I really want to talk about is the other band from Hartford, Connecticut that Killswitch reminds me of, and that is Fate's Warning. Fate's Warning was one of the great Metal Blade bands, and like most great metal bands, it took them a few albums to develop their style. Don't get me wrong, they kicked ass in the early days, but they never truly came into their own until the album Awaken the Guardian. Never has there been an album that coalesces into a genuine time and space travel experience. One moment we're amidst ogres in a Scandinavian wasteland, and the next we are American Indians striving to survive a brutal winter. Fate's Warning's follow-up, No Exit, featured a more modern, perhaps postmodern display of technical metal alchemy with songs that drain you of pure emotion. Samael, Eternal. This album does not spotlight hyper-technical phrases as much as it features a seamless amalgam of industrial programming and keyboards and hard-edged guitars. I'm envisioning an animated Space Wars film of some sort. I could have said Star Wars, but I would have to pay George Lucas some sort of royalty. Oops. Pestilence, Spheres. This is one of the few metal albums that not just features industrial programming elements, but full-on guitar synth passages and interludes that are complete synth guitar beds. Sometimes atmospheric and sometimes brutal as hell, but always futuristic. Count-Zee's very metal list of favorite Scandinavian films. Okay, this is not a list of movies made in Scandinavia, but films about the glory days of Scandinavia. I'm talking swords and sorcery here, folks. The 13th Warrior. 1 part Braveheart and 1 part Lord of the Rings, but with none of the hokey stuff thrown in. This one is about as hardcore as they come. Starring Antonio Banderas as an Arab transplant forced to live among the rednecks of old, the Vikings. Together they have to do battle with some demonic horsemen from right out of the Book of Revelation or maybe a Bathory album. Atmospheric and leaves you wondering, man, isn't it about time for a sequel? Maybe the Vikings can head down to kick some Babylonian ass. Pathfinder. Vikings are bad guys this time and look much cooler with their armor on. More of a sleeper, and the action this time takes place in the Americas. History tells us that Scandinavians landed here much earlier than we thought. Eric the Viking. This movie is as hilarious as it is inspiring. It's a hard movie to get a hold of. Very rare indeed, so snag a copy if you ever get the opportunity. Imagine if the guys behind Yellowbeard made a Viking movie. Yeah, it's just about that good. How to Train Your Dragon. Viking fun for the whole family. So what do these movies tell us about Vikings? Well, there's something to be said for the people that can not only survive but prosper in such a cold wasteland. Maybe I just like the idea of huddling around an open fire pit when it gets as cold as hell, or the clear starry night skies when the cold air sits in. So when are they going to make a movie based on the Gauntlet video game? They better hop to it before I decide to do it myself. And that's my very metal list of favorite Scandinavian, rather Viking films.